Hello there and welcome back to the Closet Historian and back to my sewing room for another project. Today I'm going to be copying one of the designs from the Butterick Counter Book Pattern Catalog Counter Book. Today I'll be copying one of the designs from the Butterick Counter Book that I recently flipped through here on the channel. You can see that video here. There are a ton of amazing designs in this book. I have scanned 99% of this book and it is up over on my Pinterest, so I can link that below as well. But the design I'll be starting with today is design 2954, which looks like this. It has two versions here, an all-in-one sleeve, short sleeve version, and then a longer sleeved, like set-in sleeve version here, and I will be going ahead and making both of those today with you because the first dress I made with the all-in-one sleeve, I used a printed rayon and you can't really see this S-curve detail very well in it, and I wanted you to be able to really see that in the finished garment, so I ended up making a second dress, which was not originally on my schedule, but you know, I like to just make too many projects in too little time. It's sort of a curse and a boon, really. Shifting from the regular pattern blocks into this S-curve gathered design isn't actually too difficult, so let's jump on over to the blue patterning table of doom and get started. Alright, like any asymmetric design, I'm going to need to trace a full front. So here I have my all-in-one bodice front here that you can see in this video that I will put in a card, and I've just traced it along the center front so that I have a copy of this with its darts drawn all the way up to the apex that is mirrored basically along the center front. So I'm going to, on this right-hand side here, extend a line from the apex up into the shoulder so that I can close the waist dart on that side just to get it out of the way. I will actually be reopening that waist dart later, but I need a smooth area down there completely like devoid of darts in order to draw the semicircle that we need. I guess it's like a quarter of a circle down here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up to the apex along this dart leg, cut down from that line I drew into the shoulder just to close this for now. So I'm just throwing that fullness up into the shoulder where it can wait patiently until we need it again. I'll just tape this shut for now, and then I have to draw my semicircle down here. And I was kind of referencing the image to see how far down from where the apex this seemed to be. It's at least 3 inches kind of below the apex. It's definitely like underneath or below the bust. So wanted to leave enough room there below the apex, but it comes to a point at the center front here, and then somewhere along the side seam. You can make this as deep or as high as you want. You could make this a straight line if you wanted to. You don't have to do a curve. You could do like any shape here that you wanted to, honestly. It's kind of like a waist yoke-ish, sort of, instead of a shoulder yoke. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark the grain line of this while I'm here, and this is lower front. And I always do little crosshatch marks on the final line that I like, because sometimes you'll see me sketching several lines and then I kind of choose one, you know? Better to sketch in pencil than marker like I do, but of course here I'm doing this for camera, so I want something bold like marker so you can see what I'm doing. And then I've cut the pattern apart, and that's right folks, I need to add seam allowance. So wherever I cut it apart and I plan to sew it back together, seam allowance is needed, so I'm going to put seam allowance on that piece and on this cut edge here of the front as well. Like so. Alright, now I can go ahead and reopen this waist dart and close the shoulder up again. Again, I'm not overlapping this at all, I'm just closing it back up where I cut it apart. And so now this here will be gathered into fit this curve here, but of course we kind of want to split that along this area, so let's go ahead and just slice into this and kind of split that fullness. Just helps this line make a little bit more sense. I don't know, to me. You don't really absolutely have to do this. It won't be a disaster if you don't. But I'm also going to put the fullness from this other waist dart into this area here. So I'll close this waist dart and open it up into 2 darts into this curve as well. So go ahead and just close this waist dart like so, tape that shut. And now we have all of our dart fullness from both apexes along that curve, or what will eventually be a curve. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in with paper. Now I'm just going to draw a straight line basically connecting these areas. It'll eliminate a couple of like tips of this stuff, but that's okay, that's a good thing. It's better that this line is straighter as opposed to like curved to encompass these things, otherwise the final design will be gathered kind of weird. It'll be almost like kind of lumpy. So for it to fit properly, you really want this to be a straight line. So it's better to cut off these little bits. A few little corners get cut off here, then that's not a bad thing, it's fine. But here we are. And because I had already added seam allowance to this area is with seam allowance planned in, and so this will be sewn onto here, like so. Let me go ahead and just lower my neckline about 1/4 of an inch here, just because the highest possible neckline is a bit tight and not necessarily the most comfortable thing to wear ever. So I'm just going to lower that a tiny bit here, and I will make sure that my back is lined up with this as well. The back of this design is just a normal back. There's nothing special going on, so I'll just use a tracing at the back of my pattern here like this. Just make sure that the shoulder seams match up And this tracing does fine. This is just a tracing of my back all-in-one sleeve bodice pattern. And now we can start working on the skirt. While the skirt in the drawing hangs rather straight, you can see here on the back of the pattern envelope, the image shows it has, definitely for the front at least, an A-line skirt, like flared skirt situation going on. So I'm going to use my A-line skirt front and back and trace my front here. Again, I'm going to mirror this along the center front so that I have a full front, because anytime I do a asymmetric design, I'm going to need a full pattern piece. I'm just going to fold this along the center line here and cut out the pattern. That way I have it all in one, like some sort of Christmas snowflake idea here. Of course, I didn't have quite enough wide enough paper there. All right, so now I have a full front of my A-line skirt front. Again, you can see me make the A-line skirt here on the channel in this video that I will put up in a card. Now we want to have our curve going the opposite direction. Now, to do this design we do, but you could also have it do the same on the same side if you want to have like a full semicircle, if you wanted to. Could be cool to do like some sort of like a moon phase, almost kind of dress with like circles and stuff. Anyway, so this is going to be flipped. I'm using the front piece as a guide to kind of draw a similar shape of curve, because it seems like it's not a lot deeper or a lot shallower, for example, so I want it to be similar enough. So I'm kind of using the front piece as a guide, and you can see I've sketched on my seam allowance here so I can see where it is, because this piece already has seam allowance built in, like most of my patterns do. But again, I'm just kind of referencing the image and thinking, do I want this to be any lower? You could have this, you know, circle be a lot bigger or a lot smaller than the top one if you wanted to have them on uneven sides. This particular design from Butterick seems to have very similar sized yokes, for lack of a better word here. I mean, this really is a skirt yoke, so it makes sense down here. But again, I'm going to cut that apart, and again, where I cut it apart, it will need seam allowance to go back on, so let me put seam allowance on this buddy. I need some new fine Sharpies here in the studio. I was going to get some, but while I was at Target, they only had like the 100 pack of a billion different colors, and I was like, no, I just kind of want like 3 blue ones. I don't need a billion of every color. I mean, I want them, but Sharpies are expensive. I do have to constantly replace these things. Now you can see that the skirt front here is stretched out in this zone. So basically what I'm going to do here is just add additional fullness in to this side. In the top, we did this by opening the darts up into this area. Down here on the skirt, we don't have darts anymore because we already have an A-line skirt. So we're just going to add so I'm just going to add, I'm going to get tongue-tied apparently. I'm just going to add additional fullness, almost like you would for pleats in a way. So I'm just cutting this apart along straight lines. I just drew 3 lines on this side. They're not even the same width apart, you know, as you can see. Then I'm going to add 6 inches of width in here. You probably, again, could get away with just splitting this once and adding 6 inches in instead of doing it in 3 and adding 2 inches in each join like I'm about to do. You would save yourself on some tape. It would, again, probably be fine. I don't know. I just like to distribute extra fullness across an area as opposed to just throwing it all in one zone. But really, the difference is very slim in the end. I'm just going to tape those back down with 2 inches in between in each of those splits. So again, I'm adding 6 inches of fullness across this side of the skirt, like so. Again, here you want to draw a straight line, and you will lose a tiny bit, but that's all right. You're going to lose like a tiny bit off the top of one of these peaks, as you can see. And because I've already added seam allowance here, basically this is already has seam allowance, and so this area is good to go. Once again, this will all be gathered down to fit into our semicircle for the skirt, like so. And then once again, I am going to use just the regular A-line skirt back for this because, again, the back is plain. In fact, the back of this pattern seems to show a slightly flared and yet with still a dart skirt, so it's kind of like a pencil skirt-ish hybrid going on that they use for the back, but I'm just going to use the A-line back because I can. And it's not going to look very different than a flared version of a pencil skirt where you still have to sew a dart, or just the A-line skirt back. It's like slightly more flared, but that's fine. Let me grab my fabric. I'm using a rayon challis today, a very printed rayon challis. Now, of course, because these are asymmetric, once again, I only need one. I don't need to cut 2 of these things. I need to cut 1 front of everything and then just 2 backs of everything. So I have this all laid out so I can see if that will fit on this fabric. This is a very fun pastel on black floral. My favorite way to do a springy summery thing is to incorporate those springy colors and prints only with black, of course. Let me just trace and cut out some facings real fast too. So I'm just have my pattern pieces here and I'm just tracing a back facing 2.5 inches wide. Same with the front here, along the center front here, just tracing my neckline to have facings to go with this as well. So I can finish that this way. And I will actually, you can see this is actually black, lightweight, fusible interfacing, and I'm going to cut out the yoke pieces, the semicircle pieces for this pattern, and these facings from that interfacing, so I can go ahead and interface all those pieces, especially in such a lightweight fabric like this challis, which this challis turned out to be quite nice to work with. There's a fabric I'll use later in this video that was much less fun to work with, but this challis was fine. It's just not the best fabric with its busy print for showing us this design later on. Of course you can see all the curves and stuff in this pattern, but once I cut it out of a printed fabric and wear it, the details definitely get lost. I'll go ahead and take those over to the ironing board here and make sure I fuse everything to the right side. Just add a little bit of stability in this lightweight floopy rayon, as I would say. Luckily this challis, again, isn't too bad. I've worked with some very, very lightweight challis before, but this one was okay. Out of the stash and into my closet, which is what we like to do. Alright, so I'm just going to trace my darts onto the back pieces here, because of course the back bodice still has its darts, so I'm just using some colored pencil to do that. And again, in a floopy fabric, it's always extra fun to do that kind of thing. But all is well that ends well. And I do quite like this dress in the end, and I can't wait to wear it on a nice day, if it would ever stop being so darn windy here in Colorado, because I would like to wear this with like a big black hat, big black straw hat, and right now it's far too windy outside to wear a big hat. Would not work well. And I have my skirt here. These are the backs that I ended up cutting on a fold, so I'm just cutting along that fold here, just because it was easiest to cut it out on a fold, but I don't need it to be on a fold because my back zipper has to go in here eventually. So just slice that as best I can with my crappy scissors. I really need to get my scissors sharpened. It's like as simple as Googling where to get that done in Denver, and I haven't done it. That seems administrative to me, and I'm not doing it. But I am going to serge all the raw edges of these pieces as well. I usually sew darts first before I serge edges, so that's just why I've set those next to the machine first. But this piece here, all I have to do for the front here is gather along this bottom portion. So I'll put 2 lines of gathering stitching in along that area along the bottom. And then for our skirt front, the same sort of idea. I have to put gathering up where we added in that fullness at the top. So just marking myself for myself with pins where I need to gather to and from, or to and fro, whatever. You know what I mean. And I will put 2 lines of gathering stitching in there. But first I'm going to serge everything. So I'm doing that here with my facing pieces, my little tails. Someone asked me recently if I feed all the tails back in. No, I cut them off. It's fine. I've never had one unravel on me, especially because they get like sewn into the seam. It's like the last ½ inch is pinched with another piece, usually. Hopefully you can see what I mean. So I've never had them like come undone on me. Then again, I'm not very hard on my clothes just because I don't go out much, and so they don't get a lot of wears per year. Let's face it. But all this I'm just running through the serger real fast. Then over here on the machine I can sew those back darts, just as usual, from the large end of the dart off the tip and then tying them shut, which is just how I prefer to sew darts, as we know. Back here on the Singer 99K today, which needed a new belt recently, and that's been working fine, but I can't find a belt for the bobbin winder that's thick enough. I feel like the old one that's on there now is like puffier, and the new one from Singer is too slim, so it doesn't hit the wheel and doesn't work. So I need to find a solution for a new bobbin winding puffy rubber band. So if you know what I'm talking about and know where I can get one, let me know. But here I am. I have my skirt front here, and all this needs to be gathered down into its semicircle. But I'm just, again, marking for myself with pins where I need to put those 2 lines of gathering stitching in. And then I can do that. Sew my facing together too. Over here, sew on my shoulder seams of my facing. And then I can put those gathering stitches in. I'm just using the largest stitch length on my machine, which I think is 6 stitches per inch. So a couple millimeters each stitch. Doesn't take very long basting stitches, this buddy, but that's right. Works just fine, but I just use the edge of my presser foot as a guide to stitch another line of stitching right next to the first, basically. 2 lines of gathering stitching allows you to have more control over distributing the gathers. It's a lot nicer, actually. If you've ever done 2 lines and you hate gathering, try it with 2 lines and you might learn that it's a lot less of a pain. Let me just press open my seam allowance on my facing here and set that aside for now. That's how I'm going to be finishing my neckline, and then I can take my bodice here. I have its little yoke, and I have my gathering stitching in, and I can gather this down to fit. So I'm pulling the 2 top threads here and scooching the fabric along. I do want to evenly distribute the gathering across the space that I have here. So you'll see me using lots of pins just to make sure that my gathering is spaced out evenly. So it's not too gathered near the waist or too gathered under the arm. It's just nicely evenly spaced along this yoke here. I did try and make it a little bit more noticeable that the bodice was done in this style by cutting the yoke for the bodice here on like a more black, like solid area of the patterned fabric, but really you cannot see it at the end, let's face it. When you see the modeling clips, you'll know what I mean. You will not be able to tell the design going on in the front of this, unless you were, again, standing very close to me, and we all know how I feel about that. Please stand 6 feet apart, at least. But again, just scooching things along, using my fingernails, using lots of pins to move things so that everything is evenly distributed in here, pinned to my semicircle, and then I can sew this down with regular 1/2-inch seam allowance. You can also use cut 2 of this semicircle piece and sandwich this in between 2 layers, and then it will be like perfectly finished and lined inside by itself. Hopefully you see what I mean by that. But I just wanted to do interfacing on this one and have it be serged, and therefore it won't come undone or anything. It's just a lightweight summery dress, you know? But over here on the machine, I can go ahead and stitch that back to my 12 inches per stitch. 12 stitches per inch. 12 inches per stitch would be a giant machine stitch and would be useless. Alrighty, take my pins out, cut all my stray threads. Now, this is a curved seam, so technically you would want to clip that curve, but I'm just going to press everything here up and it will be fine. You can top stitch this from the front, or even like do some sort of edge understitching kind of thing, but I didn't even bother with this. You wouldn't be able to see in a print like this, of course, if I did do top stitching to hold that in place, but it stays pretty well all on its own, so it's fine. But now that my front is all together, I can put the backs on at the side seam here and along the shoulder. So I am going to go ahead and stitch this. The way I do these underarm seams on my all-in-ones is that I just stitch 1/2 inch seam allowance everywhere except for the little curve right under the arm. There I narrow down to 1/4 inch. That way I don't have to clip it, just because it would kind of weaken the garment there. There are many ways to get around that kind of problem, and I've done different ways of doing it, or I've finished it different ways here on the channel before. But because this is an unlined garment, I didn't want to have to clip that area, so I just narrowed my seam allowance in that zone, which is really hard to tell what I'm doing here on the machine, but that is what I'm up to. So starting at that 1/2 inch seam allowance, narrowing down to 1/4 inch right here, and then widening back out to 1/2 inch. It's kind of hard to see what I'm doing, but that's what's happening. And I can go ahead and press open my shoulder seams and my side seams. Of course, if you do those instead of doing it all at once, one at a time or something, then you can have an easier time pressing them, but whatever. I don't mind. Some people sew their side seams last. And you know, you do you, is what I always say. As long as you get a finished garment in the end, it's worked out as far as I can surmise. Press those side seams open, and I have a working bodice, but let's go ahead and sew the facing in along the neckline. Like so. I just think this color palette looks really 40s to me. I think it's very pretty. I really like pastels, but I don't look good in them, so this is one way for me to get around that, is by infusing them into my wardrobe via black. That's right, because we all know how much I love wearing black. We can all agree this is a very springy dress for me, right? Yes. Perfect for Easter in my world. Although now Easter is over and there are no more Cadbury eggs at the store, it's very disappointing. Cadbury mini eggs are my favorite candy. They're like an M&M, but with like a harder shell. I love the shell. I love like chipping the shell off the edges of them. Yeah, I don't know. Something about the crunchy crunch. I'm here for it. And of course, Cadbury milk chocolate is quite good. Even the American kind, I don't mind. Because I'm used to the crappy American chocolate, you know? Now that my facing is sewn on, 1/2 inch seam allowance along the neckline, I can go ahead and clip that curve for sure. And then I will do some understitching on this so that it lays nice and curls towards the inside, and then I will give it a good press. So over here, I'm just sewing the seam allowance down underneath to the facing side of this, and then I can fold the facing to the inside nicely and have everything lay nice and smooth for my neckline here. I will tack this at the shoulder seams as well, just so it doesn't floop around on me. And the nice thing about this print is I could wear this with green, like light sagey green accessories. I could wear it with light blue, with darker blue, with white, of course, and this sort of marigold yellow color. I can get really creative with which color I want to pick out from the print. But, I mean, to be honest, what am I going to wear it with most often? Black accessories, that's right. But I could get creative if I wanted to, if I was feeling particularly sprightly one day. But more, you know, this is Noir Dame goes to a garden party, less me becoming a pastel person, let's face it. I'm just going to hem these sleeves by turning them twice, like the width of the serge edge. So it's like 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch, basically. I'm just going to turn it twice, pin it with these glass-headed pins so I can iron over them, and hand stitch this down. Again, you won't really see that hand stitching even. You could probably do this by machine. Hand stitching is just a little bit floopier. Machine stitching usually is a little bit stiffer because there's so many stitches per inch. Once again, hard to say, stitches per inch. Now, the same sort of process here for the skirt front, where I have my semicircle, and I have my 2 lines of gathering stitching, and I'm just gathering that down, fitting it in, and distributing the gathers evenly across the area. So same idea here, just moving along those gathers so that everything is evenly distributed. Not that I've ever been to a garden party, by the way. I think I had like a small picnic-y garden event once. I had a birthday party that was like a garden party once, but I only had like, 4 or 5 friends at the time. But I feel like we had a good day, and then it started lightly raining, which, strange for July, but that's all right. I will be 31 this July. Ooh, try not to think about that. All right, once again, I can just go ahead and press all this down. Give it a good press with lots of steam here, and the rayon will behave no problem. Like so. Now I have all that, again, invisible gathering into this semicircle. Ooh, and some of my gathering threads were showing on the outside, so I just pulled that thread out. Like so. Then I can go ahead and sew my skirt backs along the side seams to my skirt front that is now finished. But once that, the skirt is all sewn together and the bodice is all sewn together, I can pin them together here at the center front where that little S curve meets up. Of course, if this were slightly off, you would never know if you were wearing a belt, So forgive yourself, honestly. But you can just like pinch the area right where it's going to be sewn along 1/2 inch down and kind of see if it's going to line up. But because of the pattern drafting, it should line up because it works. The center front is the same on the skirt and the bodice pattern, I suppose. But just pinning this all along the waistline so I can sew it together over here on the machine. You can see me kind of lifting and adjusting things as I go, and that's just making sure that none of my seam allowance is getting caught, being sewn down the wrong direction or any of my darts or anything like that. Just want to make sure everything ends up where I want it. Every seam that I want to be pressed open stays open, things like that. And this waist seam I will press open as well, over here on the ironing board. Actually, I'm in the market for a new ironing board. I need to look into that. I kind of want to get a heavier duty ironing board. This one is like a cheap Target situation from many, many years ago, and it's kind of past its prime, as it were. Plus, I keep ruining this ironing board cover as well. But here you can see, this is where the curve matches up. It lines up perfectly, but we cannot see in this busy fabric, like I said. I am going to go ahead and put a little bit of that fusible interfacing about an 1.25 inches wide along the center back opening of this, just so that it has a little bit more stability on this lightweight challis where the zipper is about to go in. I will be doing a lapped zipper today, as I usually do. And I'm out of water in the iron, so I'm getting no steam here, and I'm like, but I want some. Help me melt this glue. I did see many of you ask about the iridescent green top that I was wearing in my last video, by the way. And I made that a couple of years ago for my Blade Runner lookbook. It is just the wrap back top that you've seen me make here on the channel. In this video, I'll put in a card, why not? It's just that wrap back top, but with a peplum. It's the same otherwise. From the waist up, at least, it's the same. Just add a little bit of skirt going on with that. But I will go ahead and make another one for you soon, since that seems to be something people want to see. And here I am just lining up my center back seam. I'm going to stitch the seam from like below where the zipper will be down to the hem. I'll just stitch that shut with a 1-inch seam allowance, which is what I've left myself on this particular design. And then I will fold back the tops that same 1 inch and be able to set my zipper in. So I'll go ahead and press that open, which gives me a bit of a guide to press the rest of this open up here where it's not sewn together. But I do have my hem gauge here as well, just to help me pin this back 1 inch and iron it into place. That way I have this like clean opening where I can put my zipper behind that and stitch it down, basically, is kind of how I do my zippers. Always say, if you have a zipper method that works for you, go for it. Zippers are still not my favorite part of the process. How many have I sewn now? But they're just still nerve-wracking and not my fave. But here I am pinning it into place with that clean finished edge, having turned my garment right side out again. Take that over the machine. I've switched over to my zipper foot, and I will stitch this first side down right next to the zipper teeth, like so, and the other side will eventually overlap this just a tiny bit so you can't really see the stitching. If everything goes according to plan, that is. Which sometimes I get it perfectly on and sometimes not, but that's alright. Pin this other side so it's slightly overlapped the teeth and the stitching, like so. And I will stitch that down back over on the machine. Again, I'm just riding the edge of that zipper foot along the edge of the zipper teeth that I can feel underneath the fabric. There's like a ridge where the zipper teeth are, of course. And the zipper foot just rides along that ridge, stitching quite close to it, but not too close. Do we think I can wear this dress with that ridiculous pastel puff feather cocktail hat that I have? Like if I ever were wearing this for evening? I think that would be fun. I have a black velvet hat with pastel feather puffs on it that I made here on the channel actually. And I think it would match this quite well. I am just melting the ends of my zipper tape with a lighter right there, because you can see. I trimmed them down and then melted the ends of it so it wouldn't fray. And then I'll just press this facing smooth in here and pin it down to the zipper tape. That way I can stitch that down a little bit and put a hook and eye up here maybe if I need to. But everything just needs to be folded down smooth. And again, I will tack the facing at the shoulder as well, right here. So go ahead and show you that today. That's right, I never film this step, but I was feeling so generous today to film myself throwing a couple of messy stitches into the shoulders. You can see what I mean when I always say that. I mean, literally I'm whip stitching this to the seam allowance a tiny bit in here and tying it off. That's it. It's not fancy. You're not missing much normally, you know? Now for that fully 40s touch, I am going to cover some thin little foam shoulder pads that I had here in my stash. So I just grabbed 2 squares of this fabric left over here, and I'm just pinning that shoulder pad inside of those along the bias so that the bias of the fabric stretches over the slight curve of the shoulder pad. And then I'm just going to pin along the edges of this, trim it down, and then I'm just going to serge around the edges of this. That's the easiest way to do this. The shoulder pad itself is covered this way, the like purchased shoulder pad, so same idea. You could also actually buy or have, if you have fleece on hand or something like that, or cotton batting and make shoulder pads. I just haven't had that kind of stuff in stock for a while, so I've just been getting shoulder pads. Anything that's easy, as we know. Here I'm trimming my hem because I let this dress hang overnight, tried it on with the kind of heels I plan to wear with this, and had my lovely assistant, aka my mom, help me out by pinning the hem even so I can cut out where it's stretched, just because an A-line skirt is cut on a curve and therefore parts of it are straight grain and parts of it are biased, so it will stretch a little bit here. So I'm just trimming it off as best I can here, and then I will fold this again. I'm just going to fold this twice and hand stitch it down for my hem. Again, I'm just folding this like a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch again. I do like to hem A-line things with bias most of the time, but in something this lightweight, I'm just going to turn it twice. And here is my finished first version, the all-in-one sleeve version of this Butterick design. Of course, with the big black hat that I can't wear outside right now. This one even has a full face veiling too. But there is that S-curve in here. You just can't see it in this print now, can you? No. I mean, they suggested a print for this. Maybe not a print quite this loud, however. But this rayon challis has a lovely swish about it here, and I would gladly wear this to a garden party, you know? Or any other day out and about in the spring or summer. But because we can't see that S-curve detailing that we added in the pattern drafting, I decided this was not a good example for this. I wanted to use a fabric from my stash, basically, is what happened here. And so I chose something I thought would look pretty, but I did not choose the best fabric for demonstration purposes. Like, the S-curve is in here, you can't see it. We can tell what happened during the sewing process, but I felt bad you couldn't tell what was going on, so I decided to make a second dress. And I chose another stash fabric, and I think this version will show you why I didn't initially want to use this fabric, because it's just too lightweight, honestly, for a dress. But I'm going to be doing the set and sleeve version for this second version. So we have more darts to contend with here because the all-in-one sleeve, one of the darts has been let into that sleeve. So here we have 4 darts to put into this design as opposed to just 2. But that's okay. It still works. You can totally do it as we did the first one. Here I added a shoulder yoke opposite as well, just for a fun take on this. But once again, I'm going to move this shoulder dart out of the way. Oh, and once again, I just have my front bodice block mirrored along the center front line here. Again, I've traced a full front. Same sort of idea. I'm going to draw in a similar lower front that we had here. Just kind of using that again as a guide because I liked the curve. but I have that dart closed so we can have a smooth area here. This is going to be very repetitive for the beginning of this video. Same sort of steps, just in the set-in sleeve instead of the all-in-one. Usually things are transferable between the two. I rarely come across a design that wouldn't work in one or the other. Once again, I'm going to need seam allowance along this edge as well, but I have more darts to contend with, so I'm kind of deciding exactly where I want to put all this fullness. So let me go ahead and tape the shoulder back closed again so I can see what I'm doing. I need to just add a note for myself to add seam allowance here before I forget. But I'll close the side dart over here as well. So I have the side dart closed up, and then the waist dart is chilling in here, but of course I can cut it away so you can see what's going on. Thank you, Blue Table, for being a good contrast against the paper. But so my side dart and my waist dart on that side are both closed into that curve. Again, we can close up the waist dart on this side as well. And then I'm going to close the side dart up into the shoulder lines here. So I cut off that yoke, close the side. So I cut off that yoke, close the side dart. Now I have this dart fullness to play with. I can decide how much I want to put up into the shoulder yoke and how much down into this waist yoke. Basically like so. And I'll tape everything down. And then mostly the process is the same, you know, sewing this together and everything. It's just gonna have a sleeve instead of having an all-in-one sleeve. Now up here, I kind of curve this line along the shoulder yoke, and I really needed to draw that straight and cut off that little bit of extra. So where it's curved above where the straight line would be, I don't need that extra stuff, and it would lay nicer without it. So do as I say, not as I do, and draw this line straight, like you can see me doing down here. Straight line, yes, good. But up here I have this curve. No, make it straight and cut off that little bit of extra. Trust me, if I could tell my past self, I would tell her. She knows better, honestly. I also knew better than to use this fabric to make a dress too, though, so you'll see the problem there. And just for, again, a tiny bit of variation, I'm going to go ahead and draw a short, little shallow V-neck as opposed to the curved neckline on this. Like so. And again, you could do this color blocked, speaking of color blocking, and you could do the semicircles in a different color or fabric than the rest of the fabric, or the rest of the dress. Or you could do like a lace overlay over those areas, or over the main area, and not on those, or switch it up. Use the front of the fabric in the main body of the dress, use the back of the fabric for the semicircles. Get very creative with the different ideas here. And actually, this dress, because I'm not totally happy with the way this second dress comes out, I might completely embellish the crap out of it in a way to like save it, because it's not very cute on its own. You'll see what I mean. But maybe if I just completely coat it in like beads and sequins, that would solve the problem. Although it also might not be a heavy enough, like substantial enough fabric to withstand the weight of beads and sequins. So maybe sequins, because sequins don't weigh anything compared to beads. Glass beads are actually very heavy. Anyway, we have our front here. Once again, I need to trace some facings, so I'm doing that now. Oh, once again, I'm just using the regular back for this, and I'm using the same skirt pattern that I used for the first dress. But again, we have the same sort of idea here. We just have two yokes, one at the shoulder and one along the waist here. And again, I have gone for some fusible interfacing. The same lightweight fusible interfacing on these semicircles again, although this fabric is even floopier than the first one, which it's just too lightweight to make a dress out of. I have various rayon twills in my stash, but this one is better suited to be a lining or something because it's just too lightweight, and it wrinkles quite easily as well, which is of course not useful in a dress. So yeah, a predicament. Tell me what I should do with the finished dress. Other ideas include tie-dyeing it in some fancy way, because I feel like if it were like a splotchier situation, it might be nice. Someone come over and teach me how to do shibori. I'll do that. I don't know. I'm not very good with dyeing things, but it could be a solution to this. Again, lace appliques of some kind. Tell me what I should do to fix this dress. What are your ideas? Once again, I'm putting in my 2 lines of gathering stitching along the areas where I need that as well. And then over here, I can go ahead and again, gather down the shoulder area to fit the shoulder yoke. Once again, I have 2 lines of gathering stitching in here. I'm just going to pull on those and distribute my gathering evenly across this seam line. This also kind of design could also look quite fun if you added in additional gathering, like asymmetrically, instead of just using dart fullness. If you added in fullness, like almost the way we do on the skirt pattern for this, added in additional fullness just across the front of the bodice, could be fun. I'll have to try it sometime. I think it would have looked nicer in this dress, that's for sure. Something to distract from how wrinkly it was going to be. But I'll just stitch that down, half inch seam allowance. back on the machine and give that a good little press here, like so. Similar to how I've shown how I do shoulder yokes before. Of course, this just has a shoulder yoke and a waist yoke, as it were. But same idea down here. We've seen me do this many times in this video now, so we get the idea, I think. But yes, I was hoping this was going to be like my silvery gray, kind of like noir, business meeting kind of dress. And in the end, it's just kind of frumpy because this fabric is not ideal. Oh well. This fabric was on super sale on Mood. I think it was only like $7 a yard. And I was like, for a rayon twill? Nice. But it's because it's too floopy. Sometimes fabrics are on sale for a reason. And once my bodice is all together, I can go ahead and again finish the neckline with my facing. Same way I did the first one, basically. Stitching it on, cutting the curves, or clipping the curves, doing some understitching. All those steps. Here you see me draw on where the V needs to be with a colored pencil, just so I can see where I need to stop that needle and create that point, basically. No one will ever see in there, so might as well. You can eyeball it, of course. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I draw it in. And for some reason, my voice is giving out on me. I don't ever talk that much, except for when I do voiceovers or podcasts now. Honestly, if I like go to dinner with a friend or something and talk for a couple of hours, because it's so rare now for me to talk that long, I definitely feel a little bit sore afterwards almost. I need to work up my vocal cords, I guess. I used to sing. That was fun. Way out of practice there. Back when I vaguely almost knew how to read music a tiny bit. Still not well. Which I do want to learn again one day because I want to learn to play piano a little bit. Mostly just so I can play like theme songs and various things. Like if I could just like randomly sit down at an organ and play the Haunted Mansion theme or whatever, how happy would I be, you know? I only want to know like 5 or 6 songs. Spooky ones. Once again, I'm just sewing this basically the same way I sewed the first dress, just had to set in some sleeves. But I'm matching it up along the waistline here, matching the center seams up and then the side seams, and making sure everything fits in between. And then I will hem this dress, all that jazz, to finish it up. And it looks like this. And here is my finished gray version of this dress. This fabric is extremely lightweight and slinky. Honestly, a little bit too lightweight to make a dress out of. I think it would probably be better as almost either a lining or lingerie or a blouse. But I did my best to try and wrangle this into a dress. And is it perfect? No, but it is done at least. I hope you enjoyed seeing these 2 different versions of that Butterick design coming together today. I, of course, will be diving back into that catalog book again for more inspiration real soon, I'm sure, because I can never stay away from the 1940s. Thank you, as always, for watching today, and thank you to my patrons for making my work possible. I'll be back here with more sewing, vintage fashion, costuming, and crafting real soon, so I'll see you then. Bye!